Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Check, check, check. Hi there. I'm Claudia Carawan from Richmond, Virginia, and I'm so grateful for technology and the wonders of Zoom that I can join you. I know you're meeting together today, and that's wonderful. And if I seem a little apprehensive, this whole process is just a little unusual, as I could not hear the beginning of the service. But I am a singer-songwriter from Richmond, Virginia. I've also served my home church, Unity of Bon Air, which is in Richmond, Virginia, for over 20 years as a music director. And what I like to do is to share music, original music, and other songs written by other artists, as well as stories. And so I'll be doing that today. And I'm going to start off by just dedicating the first song, which I did not write, to our fathers today for Father's Day. This song so reminds me of my dad, so I hope you enjoy it. I see trees of green, red roses too. I see them bloom for me and for you. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue, clouds of white, the bright blessed day and the dark sacred night. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of the people walking by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you. I hear babies cry, I watch them grow, they learn much more than I'll ever know. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Ooh. And I think to myself, what a wonderful Happy Father's Day, and I hope today that you all find a way to meaningfully honor those men that have mentored you and loved you and supported you and taught you. So right now, I would like to start with a little meditation, and this is probably different from a typical meditation. I'm going to take you on a guided meditation to an imaginary scene on a beach. It's summertime, so I'm going to ask you to use your powers of imagination right now as we move into a time of meditation. So if you would, gently close your eyes and begin to bring your attention to your breath. Breathe into your belly and exhale slowly. While you breathe, please recognize this life force within you that sustains you so effortlessly. As you take in and release each breath, be aware of this presence and be thankful. Now imagine it's daybreak at the beach. You've arrived early to see the sunrise and walk on the warm, wet sand. You take off your shoes and you begin to walk toward the beach. In front of you, you approach and climb a small, grassy sand dune. And as you descend the sand dune, you see a shore in front of you, but you quickly become aware of something peculiar. There are very few people on the beach this early, but everybody you see is doing the exact same thing. They are standing still and staring out at the water. So in curiosity, you gaze out into the ocean, and then you see what they're looking at. It's amazing. Beyond the shore, you see a pod of porpoises migrating. There are hundreds of fins swiftly moving through the water, and every now and then, one or two gracefully leaps out of the water in a perfect arc. It is simply beautiful. You take a long, deep breath as you just take in this beautiful sight before you. The sunrise is breaking, and you see all these beautiful colors, soft yellow, pink, lavender, and creamsicle colored clouds light up the sky, and all this beautiful color reflects off of the water and on the backsides of the porpoises. The breeze smells of seaweed and salt, and the sun feels warm against your skin. You're filled with such gratitude as this magnificent parade of nature passes before you. You forget all about your walk, and you sit in the sand and take it all in. You recall the scripture, "Be still and know that I am God," and you are glad to do this. As the last porpoise passes into the distance, you dig your toes into the sand, so happy, so thrilled that you get to experience this wonderful, wonder-filled moment. As we pause in the silence right now, let's contemplate this wonderful, beautiful world that we live in and give thanks. Thank you, Mother, Father, God, for a world full of miracles. Thank you for constant reminders of your presence in our lives. Our hearts sing with joy and praise that we are a part of you and this magnificent creation called life. And we bring our awareness back into this sanctuary, into this living room, into this moment. I'd like to share a song that I wrote this year with a friend, J.D. Martin. In my backyard there stands an old oak tree. She's weathered far more storms than me. When the winds of life rage all around, she digs her roots deep in the ground. The birds are singing, the bees are humming, the breeze is blowing fresh and bright. The world starts over, so do I. The coming light, welcoming the coming light. I took a walk down a downtown street. I saw a flower growing through the concrete. I was so impressed with this little one, pushing through the rock, reaching for the sun. The birds are singing, the bees are humming, the breeze is blowing fresh and bright. The world starts over, and so do I, welcoming the coming light, welcoming the coming light. Shine down on me, shine down on me, wash over me. Chase away the shadows, yeah. Coming light. Cast your light on me, yeah. Coming light. The birds are singing, the bees are humming, the breeze is blowing fresh and bright. The world starts over, and so do I. The coming light, welcoming the coming light, welcoming the coming light, welcoming the coming light. Okay. So, a few years ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to hear Maya Angelou speak in concert. It was so inspiring. She told everybody in attendance at the Altria Theater in Richmond, Virginia, that we were rainbows, rainbows in the clouds, bringing beauty and hope to the world. I loved hearing those words, and I think of them often. So today, using a few short stories, I'm going to explore her theme that when we shine, we have a beautiful impact on one another and in our world. It's true, you know. In fact, we stand on the shoulders of those who came before us, both friends, total strangers, family members. And in turn, we do our part by shining our light and passing it on. Life is a miracle, and when our eyes are open, inspiration is all around. Albert Einstein said, there are two ways to live your life. One as though nothing is a miracle, and the other is as though everything is. Now, the story that I shared earlier in the service when we were meditating of the images of porpoises migrating, that was a miracle moment that I experienced many years ago. Now, back then, I had occasional bouts of depression. And for those of you that don't know, I would say that the hardest part about depression is not the sadness, but a sense of powerlessness that would descend upon me from time to time. And when it happened, I would always worry, how long is this going to last? So I was at the beach on vacation during one of these melancholy periods. And I woke up early that morning to take a walk on the shore and to clear my mind and see the sunrise. And when I saw the porpoises migrating, I had a pivotal moment, a moment of beautiful impact. As I sat in the sand, taking it all in, I realized that there was a force in life, an order, a magnificence, a something that governed over the rising and the falling of the tides, the changing of the seasons, or even the migration of porpoises. And all of a sudden, I realized that I too was a part of this creation. And despite whatever it was that I was feeling in that moment, I realized that I was going to be okay. So many years later, it still lives in my memory as a pivotal moment in my life. So, Mother Nature is a great teacher and a great place to experience miracles. But I've learned I don't need to be on a beach or in a garden to experience these beautiful moments of impact, which brings me to a story. The year was 2016, and a few of our friends had invited us to a jazz concert, my husband and I. And this concert was at University of Richmond's auditorium. And that night, jazz vocalist Diana Reeves and her band gave a powerful, magnificent performance and elevated everybody in attendance. And on the way out of the busy concert hall, I said to my husband, I need to run to the ladies' room. I will meet you in the lobby and then we can leave. So I followed the signs to find the ladies' room. And when I got there, I noticed that there was a hand-printed sign on the door, taped to the door. In pencil, someone had written on notebook paper the words, "Trans people welcome." And at first, I looked at the sign and I had to reread it to process it because at first I didn't understand what it meant. And then I had remembered earlier in the year, there had been a political story in the news that the state of North Carolina had passed an anti-LGBTQ law, in part prohibiting trans people from using the bathroom for their gender identity in schools and government buildings. Now, I really hadn't thought much about the issue. I believed that the law was misguided and mean-spirited. But now, as I stood out in front of this bathroom waiting to use it, looking at that sign, I was thinking about the issue. I was also thinking about the fact that somebody, some love warrior on their campus, had scribbled that note on a piece of paper and pasted it to the wall. Trans people welcome. You are welcome. I smiled and felt slightly overwhelmed with a sense of gratitude. I was so touched by this little gesture of kindness. You see, the political climate in our country had been kind of toxic. And if you only watch the news, you would have believed that there were a lot of angry, misguided people out there. But this sign, this small gesture of love from a stranger, reminded me in that moment that kindness was alive and well. Now, all of a sudden, there was another person standing with me waiting to use the ladies' room. She was a beautifully dressed elderly lady. And I will state that the area I live in is very conservative. She leaned in and looked at the sign and said, "Trans people welcome." And I braced myself in a split second for what I thought was going to be an uncomfortable conversation. But then she turned to me with a broad smile and said, "Isn't that a thoughtful gesture?" Well, I must admit, that moment surprised me, and we had a good conversation and a laugh while we waited to use the ladies' room. And within a few more minutes, there was another person waiting outside the door asking us about the sign. It was her husband, and the three of us agreed that the sign was a good sign, metaphorically and literally. A moment when hope and idealism were restored. A moment in which I remembered what I had forgotten. Yes, there are angry, fearful people in the world, but there are also so many good people too. I still maintain and dare to believe that most people would give you the shirt off their back if you needed it. On a side note, that sign reminded me how easy it is to start a love revolution. You know, somebody on that campus decided to take action on an issue that was important to them. And I can't help but think that anybody that stood outside that door and read that sign would at least pause to think about this issue. This story reminds me of a quote from Mother Teresa, who says, "There are no great acts, only small acts performed with great love." Which brings me to another story. This is a story about beautiful impact in the workplace. I did not write this story. As a matter of fact, it was emailed to me many years ago, and I thought it was so moving, I shared it with my employer, which they in turn shared at a work training. But this story is about keeping wonder and innocence alive in the workplace. It's a story about a young man named Johnny who worked as a grocery bagger at a grocery store chain. And Johnny was a 19-year-old individual with Down syndrome. Now, the store offered many mandatory trainings. And one day, Johnny was invited to attend a training on giving excellent customer service. At this training, all of the employees were encouraged to find ways that they could perform the service that they did at their store and go the extra mile by finding ways to connect heart to heart with their clients, with their customers. They were also encouraged to find ways to think beyond the routine of their job description and find a way to put their own personal stamp on the job that they performed. Now, at first, Johnny didn't think he had any good ideas. How could he do this? He was, after all, just a grocery bagger. But then he got a creative idea. He decided that he could create a thought for the day that he could put in every grocery bag he filled. The more he thought about the idea, it started to come together with how he would implement it. Every night after his shift, he would go home and come up with a thought for the day. He would look for a thought for the day to share with his customers. Now, he said if he couldn't find one, he would just make one up. He asked his dad to help him print multiple copies of his thought for the day on the computer. And then Johnny would cut them all out individually and sign each one and take them to work the following day. And as he interfaced with his customers and bagged their groceries, he would slip that thought for the day in the bag and look the customer in the eye and say, "Hey, thanks for shopping with us." So Johnny implemented his idea. And about a month later, the store manager became very alarmed. There was a very long line of customers waiting to check out, and they were in Johnny's lane. This line reached from the front of the store all the way back to the frozen food section. Quickly, the manager sprang into action, opening up another lane and trying to usher the customers that were waiting to move into the newly open lane. Imagine his confusion and surprise when the majority of people said, "It's okay. I don't mind waiting. I'm here to be in Johnny's lane. I want his thought for today." One woman said to the manager, "I used to shop here about once a week, but now I come by every time I drive by because I want Johnny's thought for the day." Now, that was really something. Within a few more months, the manager remarked to the training team that the whole store had been transformed. Other employees were now following Johnny's lead, finding creative ways to put their personal stamp on the job they performed. For instance, the floral department, they used to throw away a flower if it was broken or slightly imperfect. Not anymore. Now they would walk around the store and find perhaps an elderly woman or a small child and pin it on their coat. What happened was that the culture in the store had changed. They were there not just to perform their duties, but to bring a great experience to their shoppers. I just love this story. It demonstrates quite a few principles that are spiritual principles. One is the power of a creative idea. The other is how one person can make a huge difference. Johnny's idea was not so innovative or cutting edge as it was loving. It came from his heart. It was real. And that's what touched his customers, his peers, and anybody who hears this story. He was a rainbow in the clouds. He left a beautiful impact on those that came into contact with him. Just think about it. If we can approach our work with this fresh pair of eyes and innocence, how many people we can touch? I'd like to share one more story. And this is a story from my personal life. My daughter, the year was like 2017, and my daughter had just come home from college. And just for the weekend, because it was the weekend before Thanksgiving, and boy, was I thrilled to see her. I wanted to spoil her. So I asked her, "Is there anything special I can cook for you? Because if there is, I'm going to do it." And I'll tell you right now that I'm not really the cook in the family. My husband is. So this was quite a gesture. "Whatever you want, honey, I'm cooking it for you." And she threw me a curveball. She said, I would really like a rhubarb pie. Now, I've never made a rhubarb pie before, but she threw it out there, and I wanted to do something nice for her. So off we went, the three of us, my husband, my daughter, and I, on a quest for rhubarb. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but rhubarb is out of season in fall in Virginia. Nevertheless, we had quite an adventure. So, as I mentioned, it was the week of Thanksgiving, and the roads were busy with holiday shoppers out. And we went to 3 grocery stores, 3, and there was no rhubarb. And I was beginning to realize that this is a lost cause. Our last stop was a Walmart, and wouldn't you know, no rhubarb. So by this time, we were exhausted, we were disappointed, and grumpy. It was a terrific waste of time. My husband said, while we're here, let's just get a few last minute items. And so we did that. And then when we got ready to check out, the checkout line was really, really long. And so again, more grumpiness. Looking around the store at this point, because I had nothing to do but wait in the line, I noticed something interesting as I was people watching. I noticed that I didn't seem to be the only person that was in a bad mood and that was feeling grumpy. I looked at the other shoppers and store workers. Nobody was smiling. There was no interaction, just a bunch of exhausted, detached people. My daughter at this point was staring at her phone, and I just kept people watching and looking around as we inched closer and closer to being waited on. At this point, that's when I noticed the woman that was in front of us in line. It was her turn to be waited on, and we were next in line. I noticed also that on the other side of her was a man that looked very agitated. He was carrying some grocery bags, and it appeared that he had already paid for his groceries, but he wasn't leaving the store. He just kept looking back in the store, and he looked angry and agitated. I was wondering, what's his issue? What's his story? And then everything all of a sudden started to make sense. A woman who must have been his partner appeared from the back of the store. Apparently, she had gone back in the store to retrieve a few last-minute items to purchase. But it was too late. He had already paid for his groceries, and he was not going to get back into that line to pay for these last-minute purchases. So he kind of barked at her. He said, "Put them back. It's too late. Let's just get out of here now." And then the woman that was being waited on, that was in front of us, she said, "Nonsense." And then she looked at the other woman and said, "Bring those items over here." And then she looked at the checkout clerk and said, "Please put these items on my tab, please." Well, that moment was so transformative. It just seemed like the energy in the room all of a sudden shifted immediately. Now everybody was present and awake. And, the clerk who had previously been scowling, she was now smiling. I couldn't help but softly laugh to myself. My daughter looked up from her cell phone and said, What's going on?" And I said, "Well, a moment of kindness, that's what's going on." Now, the man who was the beneficiary of this kindness, he reached in his wallet to reimburse the woman, and she said, oh no, put your money back." And then she said, "God has been good to me. I say, pass it on." And then she looked around at all of us in her vicinity and said, "What do you say?" as she locked eyes with me. And I was nodding my head in agreement. "Yes, sister, pass it on, pass it on." So she left, and then we paid for our groceries. But now we were smiling. That small little gesture just totally shifted our moods dramatically. And as we headed outside to the parking lot with our groceries, my husband said, "That was an awesome moment, wasn't it?" And I agreed. And then he asked the big question. He said, "Did you notice that woman, the woman that paid for the groceries, she was wearing an article of clothing that indicated she voted differently than us in the last election. Did you notice that? And I nodded my head. And I said, yes, I did notice that. You know, had I seen her on the street, I might have judged her for wearing that article of clothing, but she was a rainbow in the clouds, bringing beauty and hope to the world. Another moment of beautiful impact when I went searching for rhubarb, but ended up finding something just a little better. I remembered that kindness was alive and well, and that the kindness that we extend to one another has a lasting impact. So I hope these stories today have inspired you to continue to shine your light and live your life with an awareness of the beauty that you bring to life. You know, your acts of kindness are quite powerful. And, you know, kindness in our culture gets a bad rap. We think of it as soft-spoken and weak and kind of mamby-pamby, but kindness is powerful. It's huge. Kindness can move mountains. So I'm going to end my talk by sharing a quote by a wonderful writer, Thich Nhat Hanh. He said, usually people consider walking on water or in thin air a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in thin air, but to walk on earth. Every day, we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes. All is a miracle. Thank you. Are we still live?
As the ushers come forward, I invite you to hold your tithes and offerings in your hand as we bless the gifts with affirmation on the screen.
Josh, can you? She can hear us now, so she'll be able to hear your comment.
Remember, in consciousness from which we give makes a difference. We live in an infinity abundant universe.
It's on the screen now, Jack. We can do the blessing.
Okay, let's do the blessing.